Now to the Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
It is now almost 2 months since the people of this country began to put up with restrictions on their freedom, your freedom, of a kind that we have never seen before in peace or war. And you have shown the good sense to support those rules overwhelmingly. You've put up with all the hardships of that programme of social distancing because you understand that as things stand, and as the experience of every other country has shown, it's the only way to defeat the coronavirus, the most vicious threat this country has faced in my lifetime. And though the death toll has been tragic and the suffering immense, and though we grieve for all those we have lost, it is a fact that by adopting those measures we prevented this country from being engulfed by what could have been a catastrophe in which the reasonable worst-case scenario was 500,000 fatalities. And it's thanks to your effort and sacrifice in stopping the spread of this disease that the death rate is coming down and hospital admissions are coming down. And thanks to you, we've protected our NHS and saved many thousands of lives. And so I know, you know, that it would be madness now to throw away that achievement by allowing a second spike. We must stay alert. We must continue to control the virus and save lives. And yet we must also recognise that this campaign against the virus has come at colossal cost to our way of life. We can see it all around us in the shuttered shops and abandoned businesses and darkened pubs and restaurants. And there are millions of people who are both fearful of this terrible disease and at the same time also fearful of what this long period of enforced inactivity will do to their livelihoods and their mental and physical well-being, to their futures and the futures of their children. So I want to provide tonight for you the shape of a plan to address both fears, both to beat the virus and provide the first sketch of a roadmap for reopening society, a sense of the way ahead, and when and how and on what basis we will take the decisions to proceed. I'll be setting out more details in Parliament tomorrow and taking questions from the public in the evening. I've consulted across the political spectrum, across all 4 nations of the UK. And though different parts of the country are experiencing the pandemic at different rates, and though it's right to be flexible in our response, I believe that as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Scotland, England, Wales, Northern Ireland, there is a strong resolve to defeat this together. And today, a general consensus on what we could do. And I stress could, because although we have a plan, it is a conditional plan. And since our priority is to protect the public and save lives, we cannot move forward unless we satisfy the 5 tests. We must protect our NHS. We must see sustained falls in the death rate. We must see sustained and considerable falls in the rate of infection. We must sort out our challenges in getting enough PPE to the people who need it. And yes, it's a global problem, but we must fix it. And last, we must make sure that any measures we take do not force the reproduction rate of the disease, the R, back up over 1, so that we have the kind of exponential growth we were facing a few weeks ago. And to chart our progress and to avoid going back to square one, we're establishing a new COVID alert system run by a new joint biosecurity centre. And that COVID alert level will be determined primarily by R and the number of coronavirus cases, and in turn, that COVID alert level will tell us how tough we have to be in our social distancing measures. The lower the level, the fewer the measures, the higher the level, the tougher and stricter we will have to be. There will be 5 alert levels. Level 1 means the disease is no longer present in the UK, and level 5 is the most critical, the kind of situation we could have had if the NHS had been overwhelmed. Over the period of the lockdown, we've been in level 4, and it's thanks to your sacrifice we're now in a position to begin to move in steps to level 3. And as we go, everyone will have a role to play in keeping the R down by staying alert and following the rules. And to keep pushing the number of infections down, there are 2 more things we must do. We must reverse rapidly the awful epidemics in care homes and in the NHS, and though the numbers are coming down sharply now, there is plainly much more to be done. And if we're to control this virus, then we must have a world-beating system for testing potential victims and for tracing their contacts, so that, all told, we're testing literally hundreds of thousands of people every day. We've made fast progress on testing, but there is so much more to do now, and we can. When this began, we hadn't seen this disease before, and we didn't fully understand its effects. With every day, we're getting more and more data. We're shining the light of science on this invisible killer, and we will pick it up where it strikes, because our new system will be able in time to detect local flare-ups in your area, as well as giving us a national picture. And yet, when I look at where we are tonight, we have the R below 1, between 0.5 and 0.9, but potentially only just below 1. And though we have made progress in satisfying at least some of the conditions I have given, we have by no means fulfilled all of them. And so, no, this is not the time simply to end the lockdown this week. Instead, we're taking the first careful steps to modify our measures. And the first step is a change of emphasis that we hope that people will act on this week. We said that you should work from home if you can, and only go to work if you must. We now need to stress that anyone who can't work from home, for instance, those in construction or manufacturing, should be actively encouraged to go to work, and we want it to be safe for you to get to work. So you should avoid public transport if at all possible, because we must and will maintain social distancing, and capacity will therefore be limited. So, work from home if you can, but you should go to work if you can't work from home. And to ensure you are safe at work, we've been working to establish new guidance for employers to make workplaces COVID secure. And when you do go to work, if possible, do so by car, or even better, by walking or bicycle. But just as with workplaces, public transport operators will also be following COVID secure standards. And from this Wednesday, we want to encourage people to take more and even unlimited amounts of outdoor exercise. You can sit in the sun in your local park, you can drive to other destinations, you can even play sports, only with members of your own household. You must obey the rules on social distancing, and to enforce those rules, we will increase the fines for the small minority who break them. And so, every day, with ever-increasing data, we will be monitoring the R and the number of new infections and the progress we are making. And if we as a nation begin to fulfill the conditions I have set out, then in the next few weeks and months, we may be able to go further. In step 2, at the earliest by June the 1st, after half-term, we believe we may be in a position to begin the phased reopening of shops and to get primary pupils back into schools, in stages beginning with reception, year 1 and year 6. Our ambition is that secondary pupils facing exams next year will get at least some time with their teachers before the holidays, and we'll shortly be setting out detailed guidance on how to make it work in schools and shops and on transport. And step 3, at the earliest by July and subject to all these conditions and further scientific advice, if and only if the numbers support it, we will hope to reopen at least some of the hospitality industry and other public places, provided they're safe and enforce social distancing. Throughout this period of the next 2 months, we will be driven not by mere hope or economic necessity. We're going to be driven by the science, the data, and public health. And I must stress again that all of this is conditional. It all depends on a series of big ifs. It depends on all of us, the entire country, to follow the advice, to observe social distancing, and to keep that R down. And to prevent reinfection from abroad, I'm serving notice that it will soon be the time, with transmission significantly lower, to impose quarantine on people coming into this country by air. And it's because of your efforts to get the R down and the number of infections down here that this measure will now be effective. And of course, we will be monitoring our progress locally, regionally, and nationally. And if there are outbreaks, if there are problems, we will not hesitate to put on the brakes. We've been through the initial peak, but it's coming down the mountain that is often more dangerous. We have a route and we have a plan. And everyone in government has the all-consuming pressure and challenge to save lives, restore livelihoods, and gradually restore the freedoms that we need. But in the end, this is a plan that everyone must make work. And when I look at what you've done already, the patience and common sense you've shown, the fortitude of the elderly, whose isolation we all want to end as fast as we can, the incredible bravery and hard work of our NHS staff, our care workers, the devotion and self-sacrifice of all those in every walk of life who are helping us to beat this disease: police, bus drivers, train drivers, pharmacists, supermarket workers, road hauliers, bin collectors, cleaners, security guards, postal workers, our teachers, and 1,000 more. The scientists who are working round the clock to find a vaccine. When I think of the millions of everyday acts of kindness and thoughtfulness that are being performed across this country and that have helped to get us through this first phase, I know that we can use this plan to get us through the next. And if we can't do it by those dates, and if the alert level won't allow it, we will simply wait and go on until we've got it right. We will come back from this devilish illness. We will come back to health and robust health. And though the UK will be changed by this experience, I believe we can be stronger and better than ever before, more resilient, more innovative, more economically dynamic, but also more generous and more sharing. But for now, we must stay alert, control the virus, and save lives. Thank you very much.
So there we are, the Prime Minister setting out a conditional plan, very conditional plan, 3 steps for the next phase of this crisis. And apart from, well, really small modifications, there's no immediate end in sight to the lockdown. More exercise will be allowed. You can sit in the park, play sports with your family. He said he actively encouraged those who cannot work from home to, from tomorrow, return to work. And he said public transport should be avoided if at all possible. Well, our political editor, Beth Rigby, is here and was listening. Beth, so let's just go through it more carefully. What do you make of what he said?
Well, the first thing to say is how conditional it all is. And the message, I think, from the Prime Minister was, I want to try and ease us out of this lockdown, but it is actually dependent on also how everyone behaves. And the guiding light of all of it for them will, of course, be that transmission rate. And he said that the R must not go over 1. They've put in place this new 5-point alert system. So when they were worried about the NHS being overwhelmed, that was number 5. He now thinks we're moving towards number 3, but of course there's so much nervousness about a second peak, which is why the measures in terms of what we might see in terms of the next phase are so modest. And just in terms of what it means for all of us, because I think that was the most important thing from that statement, you've got 3 steps there that the Prime Minister's outlined. The first step is that from Wednesday, people will be allowed to go outside, will be able to take unlimited amounts of exercise. That could be playing a round of golf, it could be swimming in an outdoor pond, it could be angling, going fishing. So all sorts of sports, playing a game of tennis, will be allowed to do that. He said that you can sit in the local park, you can go to the beach and sunbathe, you can drive to other destinations and you can play sports, but you have to do it with members of your household. And if you want to meet up with anyone else, they would want that to be limited and it would have to be socially distanced. And then phase 2 will be whether or not we can get the children back to school, and that will be from June the 1st at the earliest. And again, I stress it depends on the transmission rate of the disease. The Prime Minister talked about a phased reopening of primary schools. Year 1 and Year 6 would go back first. If your child's in childcare, nurseries, they would hope could be back as early as June the 1st. And they also want a phased reopening of non-essential shops. As for secondary school kids, years 10 and 12, those facing exams might get some face time with their teacher, but the message to parents with secondary school children of other ages is that they will not be going back to school before summer. So it's really primary school kids, and if they can, they would like to get more year groups back before the end of term. And then this third phase is by the earliest of July, and this is subject, again, the Prime Minister very clear about the scientific advice. The government wants to reopen at least some of the hospitality industry and other public places, because obviously tourist spots in the UK are very, very worried about the tourist season. But again, that is all contingent on the R rate, and they have, as I said, put in this system to try and monitor that.
And on work and going back to work, I'm not quite clear what's changed. He used the phrase, actively encourage those who cannot work from home to go back to their place of work. Has that advice changed?
Well, it's quite nuanced, isn't it? I think that there is, from the sources I've talked to in government, they were a bit surprised at the fact that everyone stopped going to work, that everyone chose to stay at home. And the clear message there was, we want to get the manufacturing industry up and going, we want construction workers to go back to work. Basically, the government needs some more economic activity. Everyone cannot stay at home indefinitely on the furlough scheme. They need to try and encourage people back to work. But there are issues around this. There's issues around workplace safety. The unions are not happy that they haven't agreed safety guidelines with the government. So I don't think it's as clear cut. But I think what you can see there is that there's a nod towards the need to try and get the economy moving again, because, you know, as people have been discussing more openly in the past few days, there is a health cost to keeping the economy closed in terms of long-term health problems that don't get dealt with, but also the issue of people's mental health, and also the fallout of many jobs just not being there when we try and reopen the economy again, and what that means for people and their livelihoods.
Yeah, these are all very fine and very difficult judgments. Beth, for now, thank you very much indeed. And let's just have a look now at some of the new measures announced there by the Prime Minister this evening. And from tomorrow, people in England are told to go to work, if it's possible, from home, but they should avoid public transport if possible. From Wednesday, you can sit in your local park. From Wednesday also, you can do unlimited outdoor exercise. That will be allowed. People should stay 2 meters away from others whenever possible. There will also be an increase in fines for those who ignore the rules. By the earliest, June the 1st, there could be a phased reopening of some shops and primary schools. And by July, at the earliest, there could, as Beth was saying, be the reopening of some of the hospitality industry. Those are the plans, conditional plans, set out by Boris Johnson in the last few minutes. Let's just rejoin the panel for a quick word from each of them about what they make of it all. And Simon Clarke, microbiologist at University of Reading, Steve Turner from the Unite Union, Edwin Morgan from the Institute of Directors, and Jackie Semple, who is chair of the Emergency Planning Society. Simon, let's just start with you. And from a scientist's point of view, are you surprised at what he said, or do you think he couldn't have gone much further?
I don't think he could have gone any further. This is pretty much exactly what I was expecting. We really are feeling our way in the dark with this. All countries are. And it'd be very interesting to learn from other countries what they think are the restrictions that they lift that put the most upward pressure on their R numbers, so that perhaps we can avoid those coming all at once or spread those out a bit further. But I don't think he could really have done any more.
OK, and Jackie Semple, is this pretty much what you were expecting?
No, I think it's a really difficult job. You are, as Prime Minister of, as he's rightly said, over the United Kingdom, but with the fact that we've got some devolved administrations as well. So I do think that, he is trying to give a measured approach to share information that potentially is giving some reassurance to people around what potentially we could perhaps go to. So there's a bit of stabilisation there around what he's thinking may help. I think the challenge with it is how we actually apply it. And I think to sort of come out and say, well, by tomorrow you can do this, by Wednesday potentially that, it's the bit around all of that. It's the impact and the potential consequences that we've got to look at and make sure that everybody can really, the social distancing is the thing, to make sure that they can comply with that. So, I absolutely understand that, he's trying to give reassurance to all of us as citizens, but at the same time, we just need to be measured in what we're saying and what we're doing, and actually how we can achieve that in the best way, and everybody actually listen.
Yeah, OK. And Edward Morgan, he talked about actively encouraging people to go back to work. What will business make of what you heard this evening?
Well, so this would probably be most relevant to companies who have been operating over the last few weeks. From our surveys, most of our members would take about 3 to 4 weeks to get up and running fully again from where we are now. So it's positive in that it's trying to send a positive message. If you can operate safely, if you can be at work safely, then and you work in one of those industries where you have to be, then you should go back. So that's good. But I think obviously clearly we still need to see the guidance that's expected around how more workplaces can reopen safely.
Yeah, and Steve Turner, I assume for you, it is just this very big question of whether it's safe for your workers to go back to work.
Yeah, look, we understand the economic impact of this lockdown, both on our people, of course, our members, our families, and indeed the business. But to say that you can't mingle in the park, but it's safe to go back to work and maybe work within 2 meters of one another, it is ridiculous. He mentions the guidance that's being issued, but we haven't even seen the guidance. He mentions safe systems of work and risk assessment, but our offer to put 100,000 health and safety reps at their disposal to help introduce the safe systems of work that are necessary here seems to have fallen on deaf ears. So I'm very sceptical about moving from the soundbite to the very practical, detailed plan that's needed by employers in order to return people to work and to return them safely with confidence.
OK, Steve Turner, thanks very much indeed, and thanks to Simon Clark, Jackie Semple and to Edwin Morgan. Let's just join our Deputy Political Editor, Sam Coates. So small modifications in the end, Sam. Do you get the sense that Boris Johnson couldn't go as far as he instinctively wanted to go?
No, I think that the most important thing about today's speech actually wasn't the changes that he announced that are, as you say, very small. And I think instinctively in the cabinet battle that's going on between the hawks and the doves, Boris Johnson at the moment seems to be somebody who is at the more cautious end of things. I actually think the principal point of this speech was the first two-thirds where he was addressing the nation in his role of Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, because he wanted to show that he understands the pain that the nation's going through, both in terms of the suffering and costs of coronavirus directly, and the hurt that people are feeling as a result of the lockdown. Most of all, I think, by doing this as an address to the nation, rather than a press conference where there's back and forth and he's on the back foot and having to sort of deal with difficult issues, he wanted to say, I feel your pain, I get it, there will be a better future because the present is so painful. And I don't think we can dismiss that. I think that actually, given that the concrete measures were so small, that was clearly the intention of Downing Street tonight. So what of the future? And I think you're right. I don't think that we have particularly changed the dial. The most important thing isn't the policy tweaks, but the headline message, that move from stay at home to stay alert, that move to encourage people to go back to work who can't work at home, something that was still part of the guidance, but not quite as aggressively signalled. I think those are the messages they want people to hear.
OK, Sam, thank you very much indeed. Stay with us. And of course, reaction to the Prime Minister's statement is likely to dominate tomorrow's papers. We'll be taking a first look at those front pages in our press preview on Sky News tonight at 10:30 with City AM's comment editor Rachel Cunliffe and the columnist for Unheard, Paul Embury. We'll have much more on the Prime Minister's statement right after this break.